I don't get down on the downs or up on the ups. I just roll, and that's where it is, because if you ride that roller coaster, it's hard.
Hello, and welcome to the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan. Today on the show, we have Jason Yarusi. Jason, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here, man. I'm excited for us to get into everything we're going to get into. We were just talking a little bit about where our stomping grounds are, in a sense, and how sort of different it was in certain ways. But hey, man, why don't you kick us off? Tell us what you do for a living, and what's one thing most people don't know about you that's maybe a little odd or bizarre?
I am down here just south of Nashville, Tennessee, in a town called Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I invest in apartment buildings. I've bought commercial real estate for over a decade now. I own about 3,300 units across the Southeast in 7 different states. And so that's our primary business. We have a property management business and 2 HVAC and plumbing businesses and a coaching business. So that pretty much wraps up from there. What's odd, I met my wife in 2003. It took us over a decade to actually become a couple, but we worked in a bar together for over a decade before we actually became a couple. So that seems it. And she ends up being from Hawaii, and I was from New Jersey, meeting in New York City, and now we're in Tennessee. So as randomly, we're the only New Jersey Hawaii couple here in the state of Tennessee I've found.
That would be a little odd of like, so where are you two from? Jersey, Hawaii. How the hell did you get to Tennessee?
Pretty much every conversation who asked that. Yes. Yeah. 100%.
So I've never been to Hawaii. My partner lived in Hawaii for a little while. Her family lived in Hawaii for a while. And every time I hear about it, there are just different parts of like the different almost environments that there are on the different islands and how everything's vastly different. And I'm like, but I've never been to any of them. So how is it that your wife went from Hawaii to New York to now Tennessee? And how did you all get to Tennessee, and why not Hawaii?
Yeah, I mean, so theater, right? So she moved to New York City for school through theater, right? And so theater, she did theater there, and she moved to LA for a little bit. And as many happen in the arts, you find your way into working into something else. And so she started working in bars, right? So she was working in a bar in New York City, and I was traveling around. I moved into New York City just doing odd jobs, and I ended up coming to the bar she was working at, right? And so that's how I ended up there. And then at a certain point, she moved back to Hawaii, and I was still working in New York City, and her and I started connecting, and we ended up meeting out in California and becoming a couple before moving back to New York City. And then moved out to New Jersey to work and run the family construction business before moving into real estate. And one day we said, you know what, we should think about moving some places. And then on the cusp of that, hurricanes, or what's called COVID, came around, right? And in COVID, we had 3 little kids. They were in and out of school. It was just chaos. It was just like, it was just, nothing made sense. So we were like, well, this is a great time to decide to move. And we were thinking, not Hawaii, we were thinking Phoenix, Denver, or Nashville, right? And Phoenix, it was just all desert. We liked the kids outside. It just, for some reason, we ruled that out. Denver, we were out there a lot for all kinds of, speaking things for real estate. We just, for some reason, had enough with Denver. And lo and behold, we had a bunch of property down this way, and we had a couple of friends who were in select cities around Nashville, and we had just actually brought an apartment building in the city of Murfreesboro. So we said, let's move down there. And I had been there, but Peely, my wife, had moved down here basically sight unseen. With the premise, I was like, listen, let's just go there. And if we like it, great. We did, right? But if we didn't like it, we'll no harm, no foul, we'll move somewhere else. But moving back to Hawaii, she hadn't been there, almost in like 20 years now. Like, her whole family's still there, but she hadn't lived there. But it's a whole different world, right? It's great to be there. We take the family out there. We'll go once a year and typically stay somewhere around 10 or 12 days. And then her family can come and visit out here. But it just, not the place we chose to live today. Not to say that I ever said I would live in Tennessee. So tomorrow could be a whole different story.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm sure it's also a lot different just living on the islands. Like the amount that things cost, getting things to you. There was somebody I talked to recently where they were getting some new stuff for their podcast, like getting them set up, and we're working through that stuff. She's like, well, it takes like an extra 2-3 weeks to be able to get things where I'm located, where you can't just always prime things or whatever. Sort of first world problems, but it is what it is.
Yeah, her family was like ordering a dishwasher. It was gonna take like 5 weeks. It was something crazy. And then funny when COVID happened, like they got rid of all the rental cars. So you go over there and like the rental cars are like, if you want to get a rental car, it's like $500 a day. It's like, so you just have those constraints that are just, odd to the universe, right? But you see that how the economy is shaped there. I mean, it's almost construction and tourism now, right? And that's where it all goes. And so a lot of the, pineapple or sugar cane, like it's funny because they used to have sugar cane, sugar fields, and like, but if you look at the sugar packets, they will say like, it will say some reference of Hawaii, but it like made in New York City. Right. And so you're like,
Yeah.
like basically Hawaiian sugar shipped from New York. Right. So you look at that, and you're like, man, how times have changed. Right. But that's just the adaptation because you can't survive with all this farmland. Right. So you sell it off for production. And that's where you see a lot of like multi-generational homes. Right. It's because the real estate, it's constrained by the island. And then you have limited houses, but then you have families who want to stay there, but then the income doesn't track. Right. So then you'll have, the grandparents living with the parents, and then the kids will stay longer. And so you have these multi-generational houses that are worth, $800,000, $900,000. You put it on this part for a very small piece of property. But if they want to sell, the choice is that they either have to move off island, right, and move to the mainland, right, somewhere else, or they don't have a way to replace that because the next home is just going to be that much more expensive. So they stay in that home and just continue to just adapt to it.
Jeez. Yeah, I mean, we can't make more land. Maybe we can start building underwater, but I think we'll probably be on some other planet by the time that
Yeah, we'll
actually
probably go to
happens.
Mars before we source
Yeah,
that.
if Musk has anything to say about it. Um, but that's interesting. And one of the things that you kind of just like blew past pretty quickly was that you have several different businesses and like 100 billion different homes. I've used that number twice now. I don't know where that's come from, but you have a lot of different rentals, and that's a lot of management. So one of the things I like to be able to talk about with people, no matter what you're doing or what's going on, like everybody experiences things a little differently. They relate to things differently. We all think like, oh my gosh, my day is so busy today, but it could be busier, without actually pointing to somebody else and saying like, well, you have it worse than I do, or it could always be worse, etc. But we all have to manage the way that we go through things. I mean, the whole point to self-mastery is, again, just kind of heightened level of discipline. But for you to have your family, all the different businesses, all the things, and then still be able to try to find time to just do the things that make you happy. And I'm not talking about just like going to the gym or doing stuff that you need to do to keep yourself healthy and things of that sort, but just like pastimes and hobbies and all of that. So I want to get a little macro with that sort of stuff because I think we could easily go down the real estate path. And I almost caught myself because I'm interested in that sort of stuff. But I want to get macro with this of like, how did you actually go through all the stuff that you've gone through? And how do you manage your days and still be able to have time for not only podcasts like this, but just life? And you said you even have to go pick up one of the kids. I'm assuming you're not the dad that's like, hurry up, get in the back. And then you just like fly off. I mean, you might be, dude. I don't know. But, I want to be able to talk about the discipline of that and then being able to figure out like, how do we take pieces from that everybody can kind of walk away with? So where do you want to start with it?
I what came to mind is like relational, we all can only just see our problems, and so we only have relation of who's around us, and we all typically are in some range of similar problems, and so we think our problems are so bad, right? And there's that I think it's a Socrates quote because it just reminded me of it, where it's like if everyone in the world took all their problems and put them into one big pile, and then took that big pile and split into even parts, and everybody took their problems out from there, the majority of the world be begging for their problems back, right? Because we don't have it that bad. We actually have it really good, right? And so when we can do that, the world gets a lot easier. And what really was the part is that, from working in bars, I just jumped to where we are today. But in the meantime, we just wanted to stop working in bars, right? So we just had Peely stop. And then I moved to run the family construction business, and we were able to run that. A really busy time. It was actually you lived up in Philadelphia when Hurricane Sandy happened up there. My dad's business was really targeted on really foundation issues, raising homes. He had done that for over 4 decades, and so his business exploded. So we went from there to doing almost like something like 2,000 projects in like a couple of years. It was nuts, right? So we were very busy with that. And then we started to do different forms of real estate, which was very transactional. And all I was doing was being very transactional in nature. And with that really requires me. and it requires effort, right? Because if I'm not doing a task, then I'm not creating a result, then I'm not getting income, right? And so if you look at that, the more I can do, the more I can get, right? And it's that vicious cycle that the world never stops. And so here we are, Peely, my wife, was pregnant with our first child, and all we kept thinking about was like, we just have to find a way to get our time back. Because the one thing we were lacking was that I couldn't create more time, right? There was, if there was 8 days in a week, I would be like, okay, let's use the 8 days, but there's not, right? It was me just trying to constantly, squeeze more juice out of the limit, right? And for that fact, we said, okay, we have to do something different. And what it was just change the priority list. Because right now, when you change your priority list, you start to maximize the time you have for the other items. And priorities, of course, right, is your business, your life. But really, you look back at it, it's like you want to have that time with your kids, your family. You want to be able to go explore and do your things you want, and that doesn't come later. You can't constantly push that off, or you run out of time, right? You get to this point in the end where you want to do all this stuff, and then the end comes and you haven't done all this stuff, right? And then your life's over. And so you have to look back and say, okay, what's important to me right now? And we wanted to set a nature where we could spend time with family and do the things with the kids and be present. And that became the priority. And so it made the time I had for everything else that I actually had to be focused to do it. So what that looks like now is that, we do have all these businesses. I have a great team of great employees. However, I coach I'm coaching soccer, I'm coaching basketball and flag football for, 3 different kids. Right. And so like, I make those a priority. And is it busy? Sure. Yeah, it's busy, but then it makes the time that I'm here at work that I have to be focused where I am. Like right here, like being on a podcast, like I could be here and be like, oh, I'm so busy. Like I'm here talking to you, but then I'm like texting on the phone. I'm doing all these things and I'm not really here present. Right. Well, that's how our life gets, is that like we're with our family, but then we're not really present because we're there with them, but then we're trying to, text and do this and do that. But then the same thing at work, we're at work, but we're not really focused because we feel bad because we weren't really committed when we're with our family. And then we're not really getting the max at anything. And so it got back to just setting priorities. And if you're saying, I just don't have time to do this with my family, right? Well, then make it that you have time. And then you have to figure everything else out, because we don't realize that the waste that happens within the rest of your life, right? You have all this time where you find time to do random things that don't need to be done because you haven't really scaled the list of what really needs to happen right now to have the most impact in my life.
Sure. One of the things I really appreciate about having these conversations, we're in a safe space to be able to talk about this stuff. We're not in an immediate spot where we have to do anything with it. And there are sometimes I hear from people that are just like, you can't mindset yourself through life, and like, you can't just do these things because there are blocks and whatever that they have. But one of the things that you're pointing out is actually saying, well, if I have a finite amount of time, and just being straight up logical with it, what can I do within that? How do I shift the things, and what priorities do I put this? But sometimes it can be easy to just talk about these things. Now, clearly you've done it, but I'm sure there were times where you were like, well, fuck, I need to do this today, and I need to do these 8 other things. And then being able to kind of massage and work through over the course of time where you kind of have less of those things, but you find it yourself into a rhythm. There's certain conversations I have with people at times where they're just like almost quickly overwhelmed with it, because they've been using it as almost a badge of honor of being just so busy. And I think that was a big thing with hustle culture for a long time, where everybody's like, oh, I'm busy and I'm doing all these things. And it's like, okay, well, how do you actually step outside of that? Did you find yourself in that throughout, 2003 to 2024?
I mean, that's a lesson for anyone, and even in just still today, is that I'm an action person, right? And so we're doing transactions. We have a lot happening. We have multiple things, and like you create controls and you create episode. But the real part with it is to actually focus on what's happening in front of you. So you're not just doing a bunch of stuff, right? Because we can just all fill our time just doing stuff, but it's something that needs to be done, being done, right? Because like, that's what usually happens, that most people don't want to change because they're worried about all the things they're juggling right now. But if you actually, it's like, I equate it like if there was like a waiter with a bunch of plates, right? You can't drop all the plates, but in your life, there's a lot of things you can drop. It's not going to have an effect. Right. But sometimes you have to drop it and you'll find what the priorities are. Like the priorities, I got to pick my kids up today. Right. Like, and like, that's a priority. Right. I have to make sure, that, payrolls and like these things are like are important because it goes in the levels of importance. But, do I need to go, buy stamps today? Oh, if that was on the list? No. Like, but you use that, like they're all the same level of urgency or importance. Right. Like, but in fact, they're not. So you have to create the importance level of the things in your list, because usually there's 3 things, maybe 4 things that you need to do each day. They're going to bring you you into a better spot personally, financially, physically, emotionally, you name it, right? But what we'll do is those are usually things that are a little bit uncomfortable. So we'll put them at the bottom list and we'll fill it with the 93 other things that really kind of you could do, don't do, it doesn't really matter, but you'll do them and then you're so busy. And then you just don't get to the bottom three or four that should have been done first. And then the same thing happens tomorrow and the next day. And then what goes from there is that you don't get results. And you're like, well, why am I not getting results? Well, I'm not getting the things done that are uncomfortable, but that's what's going to push me past where I am today to get where I want to go.
I think there are like tried and true situations and ways to go about this. Again, we're being very logical about it. Like you have this amount of time, these things need to get done. If you do the things that are fun first and you take up 9 hours to do it, and you don't have any time to do the other things. But taking a step outside of that, I also want to talk about how, like you'd even called yourself out of being an action person. You're more of a generator. I don't know if you get into human design or things of that sort, but when we generate throughout the day, then we go to sleep at night and we wake up the next morning and we just have more energy to do things. There's a lot of people that are like that. And then there are others that they literally need a lot of time. But I think finding ourselves to figure out, like, how do I actually operate? Like, I remember seeing some quote, I think it was from Mark Cuban, who was like, I wake up before my feet even touch the floor. I've got a laptop open and I'm doing other things. And there are other people that they have like a 9 hour ritual in the morning where they have to go out and jump into negative 28-degree water and go hunt bears or whatever they do for like the 9 hours to get their day together. But we all have to figure out what actually works for us. So let's get a little macro with that. What did that look like as you're trying to kind of figure out? Because it looked like you went, or it sounds like you went from, all right, I'm going to go in the bar. We don't want to do this anymore. All right, I'll help with the construction business. Geez, this is crazy. There's a lot going on. And then from there, we have money. I'm already kind of familiar with this. I'm going to jump into these things. And it like kind of snowballed that way. But I'm sure there are days where you were like, what the fuck? Everybody just needs to leave me alone for like an hour. How did you go through that?
You create that hour, right? That's the thing is that, when you're working in bars, like I had many days where you're just up late, you're drinking, you're just out of control, right? And then you're getting chaotic results. And then you're like, well, why am I getting chaotic results? And then there was one night I left the bar at 2:30 in the morning. I was on my bike. I was heading across Manhattan and I got hit by a car, right? And I got a couple, stitches. I got a pin in my wrist. I got a broken bone in my shoulder. And I didn't like working the bar. I was just working at the bar, right? And I was thinking the next day, I was like, I need to get back to working at the bar because I need to, make rent coming up, right? And so you have that crazy thought of like, well, I am doing exactly what I want to do. And now I have this crazy thing happen. I'm getting all these kinetic results and I'm thinking about just getting back to this crazy life, right? And your choice is you just keep doing that. And many times, like, it's just not uncomfortable enough. So we don't make a change. But or you just start to do different than what you're doing, right? And so I adapted slowly to start slowly doing things differently because, usually when we're stuck, we don't know how to break free, even though if it's just changing one thing that's breaking free. We're just stuck. It's like we have these imaginary handcuffs that we can't break the patterns that we're doing. But when you start to do small changes, right? And so stop drinking at night, get up early, start to work out, start to have a consistent plan, right? It doesn't happen it doesn't happen immediately, but you start to create things that give you energy that start to stop taking away and start build into, right? And so, today, my life looks like I wake up early. I'll have a glass of water right when I get up. I will go and I'll meditate. I'll meditate for less than 10 minutes, but I'll meditate and then I'll go work out. And that's it because it gives me my pause, my time. And by that time, the kids are getting up, my wife's coming together, and then, they'll get breakfast and I'll take them to school, right? I don't eat in the morning. I'll eat afternoon, right? And just that's been a pattern that's worked for me for a long time now. But I've done that because it just gives me that moment of pause before everything else starts. Because when it starts, you don't get that pause back, right? You can't go hide in the corner at this point, right? You literally have a lot happening, and phone, email, this call, that's just part of the day. So you have to take a breath, and that breath is to just take a control back, and that basically like setting my control so I can be at my base level, right? And we think a lot like when we're evaluating apartment buildings, we have our best case, we have our worst case, and we have our base case, right? We want to have my base case every day is I can just have a calm position that I can start the day from. And when I do that, what's happened is I've built in that, there's going to be wildfires every day, just, in any part of your life. And if you're trying to avoid them, it's going to be harder than if you're just trying to mentally be prepared to be focused when they do show up. Then you're ready to actually just deal with them. Right. And so I've had my moment. I'm paused. I go through my day, and whatever happens, okay, I am now clear in my mind, right, and just my thoughts, that I can go and just really be present with what has to be done, just because now we can get through it.
And that makes sense, man. I think there's for you to be able to set the parameters for yourself and boundaries, in a sense of like, I got to have me time to be able to do these things. And I'm glad that you're honest and real about it. I don't really have anybody on here that's like fake or straight up lying about things, but it's interesting when I find that there are people that are like, well, I can meditate for hours and hours and hours. Because if you really talk to them, that's not a thing that they started last Thursday. They've been doing it for like decades, because it's incremental growth, and you start to do it. It's almost like when you're at the gym and you're like, all right, well, I'll do this weight. That wasn't as terrible. Maybe I'll put a little bit more. Next thing you know, you're doing more and more and more. And it's not like it keeps going where at some point you'll just be able to do bench presses of 1,000 plus. Like, that's not how we're built, but you find that sweet spot for yourself. I also realized just over the course of life for myself and talking with other people, working with people, that there are also things that we get that are probably part of our genetic makeup. But then there's also the environment thing. So you said the family construction company. I assume your pop or your mom started it, and probably not when you were 25. Was it something that like you grew up in with them running
Yeah,
a
I mean, I
business?
come from 5 generation of construction, right? And so, and a bunch of Italians, my family, that no one, everyone was in disagreement. So it was really just my dad, right? Because no one gets along, right? So my dad, always in construction, but started really working in heavy construction. Probably, I mean, just by the time I was born, he was already into that business. So he had done that, but it's not easy. I mean, a small business, when you're running a mom and pop, and that's honestly what we do today, is we buy a lot of those operations, and we improve them, because there's many ways that, a mom and pop operation is great, and there's many ways that a mom and pop operation is not great, right? Typically, it's that the business is everything, right? You never leave it, outside. You bring it home, right? That's part of anything, right? If you're a business owner, like there's a very hard separation of church and state, right? And so that business was a very involved, intense, difficult, and hard business, right? And so he did that for many years. And so when I came out and started working the business, my little brother was working for me in the city. He came out and started working with us too. And it was more Italian, so constantly more battles, but we were able to really do a lot, right? We were able to grow the business, but it still had constraints, right? When you're still running a family business, it had constraints. And so I use those as lessons. Like, we got my dad to retirement. Fantastic, right? I didn't know that would ever come. But in the piece of it was that, I look back in that, and there's lessons everywhere, right? I learned lessons from working behind bars. I learned lessons from working in family businesses. I learned lessons. I opened and sold a brewery. I learned lessons from that. You learn lessons from everywhere. And the goal is that when you look at these lessons, you're going to use the lessons in a couple ways. Like, okay, cool, I can build upon that, or like, that's a lesson not to do that again, right? And I had both of them. Like, my dad, very, very great. He knows how to do all the things, but from a business side, there was a lot left, right? He was not the best in the business side because he was so busy working. And that's many times what happens when you're so into it, you're so busy doing the thing that you forget that it's actually the business that needs to operate for you to be able to do the thing. And so we were able to give some context to the thing, and create more variables, and then, learn how I can do other businesses in a way that can continue to optimize. Because you want to look at them as like, many times businesses get capped because they don't have a huge ability to get economies of scale, right? And that was one of them, right? It was very labor intensive, very insurance heavy, they just things that were hard to scale. So, okay, cool. So we have to go and just be very cost conscious, right? While driving revenue, right? And so you take that and you look forward to what we're doing today, is that I have a lot of those little nuggets that have been built into what I do as our day-to-day business today.
Makes sense. Are there any kind of pivotal moments that you can look back to think like, damn, that thing sucked, but because of that situation, here's where I'm at? Or this is one of the things where like it was like a massive missile went right past your head and you guys were able to learn from it, but that has changed the way that you run the other businesses and how you also run your family. just by being yourself and being able to show to your kids, like, hey, you can do these things. And that was part of what I was bringing up with your parents too, of like, hey, we can do this, but we can still be parents, where other people sometimes are just like, well, my dad was never around because he ran some company or what have you. So all of that lines up. But are there some key moments you can look back to go, damn, that was a changer right there?
Oh, I have dozens. There's lots
Pick
of
one.
things
Or,
that
yeah,
build
I
upon,
bet.
like my dad worked so hard. He wasn't around like a lot during high school, and like that was he was just working hard, right? But he wasn't there. Like he would be out before I was awake, and then back after I was asleep, right? And so, but he was trying to accomplish, right? And so no fault there, right? The real estate business, I have thousands of people living in buildings, right? So things are going to happen. Like I brought a building, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago, and all the right inspections, everything came back approved. And a month in, there was this lift system because at one point the road had been rebuilt higher than the sewer, right? So you had a system that actually pushed the sewer line up. Well, the lift system broke. It took all the building out, so nobody in the building had water, right? And like it was like the first reports come back like, oh, you might not be able to get this part for like 3 months because it was built in like it was a Chinese part to like replace this thing, right? But you have to always be in figure it out mode because that's the part. It's like, okay, I can't have this whole building vacated. Like that's not the option. So the figure it out mode is that, okay, how do I find the right answer? And just have to look at your team, look at people around you, and then because there's the right answer out there, but many times I'm not getting the right answer. I either don't know the right question or I don't know the right person to ask it to, right? And so we ended up getting to the right person who had a connection with a company that actually manufactures parts, and within I think it was like 36 hours we had the building back up, right? So you go from catastrophic event to being like, okay, solved, right? And that's like a lot of what it is that you got to learn not to panic when these things happen, because it's not ideal, but this is what you're in it for. Like you're an entrepreneur, like you're solving problems. And so when the problem comes up, right, okay, it's either let's run away from the problem and it's just probably going to compound, get worse, right, and just manifest, or let's just dive into it and just figure it out. And if you look at it like, you could think of it as like 5-second problems or 5-year problems. Like if it's a 5-second problem that you're only going to remember for 5 seconds, just deal with it, just get it done. If it's a 5-year problem, you got to put your energy into it because it could make a big difference. So be full all in, right? And when you do that, then you can really set your sights on what's really priority right now.
You pointed out being not panicking. That was one of the things you said, even just going through what you do in the morning to make sure that you're calm. That's something I noticed right off the bat, even when we first started talking. You were just instantly calm. Like we're starting off having a conversation. You obviously have some energy to you, and I think shit, even if you spent 4 or 5 years just in Jersey and then moved, you'd still have probably some Jersey energy in you. So no matter where you're at, believe me, I understand that. But I think that's a testament to the work that you've done, but also being able to look at things as illogical and looking at things of like, well, we just have to get this stuff done. So how do we go about it? But that's where some of the macro pieces come into play of like, if there was some trauma that was living in your body, some situation that kept telling you, look, you're stupid. Every time this happens, it makes it worse. And then you start to go through those things. Are there any of those things that you've kind of worked through that the audience can take away from? Because it sounds like you could go from a situation with one of your buildings to a kid to something else to this thing and that thing. And it could be like hit after hit after hit that would just chop you down. But if you can look at it and say, well, we're not going to panic, we're just going to move through these things and do it. Were there moments where you did panic over the course of time that you were like, well, here's how I learned to work through that?
There's always panic and there's not, right? And so, and especially as you go through things, right? You either are always in a state of emergency, right? Or you learn that everything's not an emergency, right? And like even in the world here, it's like with teams, right? You're either going to build a team where every time something happens, they run to you, or you're going to empower the team to do something, right? And that's what you have to do to really have a business that grows. So, yeah, I mean, there's been countless times where we face things that are just all kinds of things. I mean, we had a closing 9, 8 months ago, right? And like very big closing, and somehow there was like four lawyers, just way too many people involved. And usually with that, it creates a, an issue, right? Because someone misses something, right? And we're at literally 2 hours to the closing and there was, it was a very dialed in closing because the seller had to break a security that was their loan to be able to close. And it had to be done in a timely fashion and it would have blown up and we would have lost a couple $100,000, the whole deal. Well, one of the lawyers ended up not reading the paper right and couldn't give an opinion letter because they weren't licensed in the state that they needed a letter in within. And we had like an hour and 45 minutes to close. And so it was this part of like, well, what are we going to do now? Let's try to, or it could have been like, oh, I guess that's it. And like, let's be mad at the lawyer and everything else. And like, like throw our hands at him and scream at him and all the things. And like, a decade ago, a year ago, it would probably be where my energy went. But the part was just like, well, that sucked, but okay, what are we going to do? And so we just got on, we found it. I ended up randomly knowing a guy who I had met through a connection who was a lawyer that I literally just knew that was licensed in the state. I called him, I was like, listen, I got this thing. I will pay your rate double if you can get it done in the next 45 minutes. And he got it done. And I think we closed when we had about like 7 minutes left for this to be able to fund for what it was. But it was just like, yeah, okay. And then, but like, it's not a thing that you celebrate or not. Like I think I've learned that I don't get down on the downs or up on the ups. I just roll and that's where it is. Because if you ride that roller coaster, it's hard because if you look out, like, I think, a good equation was like my youngest is 6. And he was like, how is the world around, but we're driving it so straight right now? And you try to explain to them that how small of a format we're in, that like right now we're such a small scape, right? So like right now it's sunny here, but on the other side of the world, it's the sun's not out because now the world is round. And so just where we see it looks straight, but if you looked out, hundreds and thousands of miles, it would have a curve to it, right? But that's like what we do with our life is that we treat every up and down like we're on this roller coaster. And if you just look out over your course of your life, it usually just has a nice curve to it in a nice, good way. But we get so stuck in the ups and downs that we get lost in the moment that it makes everything emotionally harder. And I'll give you one more equation. It's like New Jersey and Philly, your same thing. Like it gets real hot or it gets real cold, right? But it doesn't get like hot and cold in the same day. Well, like here in Tennessee, like it's weird because like the cold can sometimes feel colder because it will be like 15 degrees in the day and then it'll get like 65 in like the middle of the day and then like 12 degrees in nighttime and then it's like 15 degrees and then it's like 55 degrees and it's like you can't figure out the weather, right? It's like never hot or cold. It's like everything at the same time. So it feels more shocking than if it was just inherently cold or inherently warm, right? But if we look at our life, we just have to stay balanced with where we are because then it allows life to just be lived.
Man, you nailed it with the temperature. Where we're at, it was literally like 25 or so this morning. It's basically 60 right now. Like I would have the window open, but there's a dog outside. So I will once we're done. What an interesting thing. And even as you were talking about that stuff, it's like there are outliers to all this stuff. I don't want to call anybody out, but I don't think we have anybody that listens that believes in this. Maybe we do, but you're talking about the globe and the earth being round. There are also people that think you could keep driving, then just fall off. So there are outliers to these things and beliefs that come from different spots. And one of the things you had even said, like 10 years ago, a year ago, whatever, it's like these are incremental growths that even if shit gets kind of crazy, you can go nuts. You can yell at those people. You can throw things. It's not going to give you your money back. It's not going to get your shit done. And it's not going to get the deal done. But you can be upset and grumpy, but that's not even going to do anything. For you to go like, oh, well, damn, that sucks. All right, what do I do? Well, I can call this dude. This is how I can get this thing done and start to move into that motion. I was having a conversation earlier with how animals are different than we as humans are. We can stew on things. Like a bird might sit up on a wire and see something that's right down that they just want to go grab and eat. They're not going to think like, oh man, I kind of hurt my ankle this morning, or, I got into a fight with the wife before I left. And now I got to feed these damn little birds or whatever. It's like, no, just going to get its shit done, go down, eat it, and move along with its day. If it were to get angry, it were to get crazy about it, it could potentially miss and then not eat. And not be able to do those things where we as humans do that stuff, where we get so angry. And like, I see it in sports at times. Somebody will get just so frazzled in the moment. And other times, other people just don't. Like, I don't know what side you're on, but I'm assuming it's either green and white with the Jets or blue with the Giants.
I'm a Jets fan. It's a pain. It's almost a good thought of perseverance, right? And
Yeah.
even when I see with the Jets fans is that many times I see so much excitement at the beginning of the year just to be beat down. But if you just go in there emotionally ready for a heartache, if the goods come, right? But you can't get too high to find a letdown.
Well, at some point, Gary Vee will own the Jets, and I think something good will come out of that.
I
But
think we'll at least have some good marketing will come our way from the Jets for sure.
at least, at least. But I think of, the Eagles won the Super Bowl this year. Jalen Hurts was just cool, calm, and collected, and they
Yeah.
beat the hell out of the Chiefs. If he lost his mind, if he went a little crazy, then he could have missed those things. Just like basically what you're talking about of the not panicking thing. So along those lines, for people that are on their path towards self-mastery, what sort of advice would you give to them regarding how to basically keep cool in those really tough spots?
Get back to the actions, right? And I think usually when there's a lot of stuff going on, you just have to break down actually what's going on. And it could be anything. Like you could, mentally put in the silos. You could write down the five things in front of you on paper, but you have to break it down because you can't deal with it all at once, right? So you have a lot of stuff going on. You can only deal with one thing at a time, right? So you have to figure what is the thing of a priority list and just focus on that one thing. And it just gets back to little steps. The little steps build into big steps. And you're taking little steps the wrong way, right? You're going to be really off track. But if you can get back to where these little steps building into, then that one step after the other, it just builds confidence back in you because you're now building that momentum. But if you look at these like big goals, you try to go after big goals and you don't have any foundation for where you're trying to build upon, well, it's going to crumble fast. And that's why you don't see goals reached a lot because there's really no actions that are built out to achieve the goal at hand. It's just a wish.
Yeah. It's just like having the strategy of hope. Like it's a good thing to
Correct.
have, but that's not
Yep.
going to really gain much.
It's Star Wars.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you being on. And before I let you go, where can people find you and where can they connect with you?
Yeah, Nick, great talk. So you can find, I have the Live 100 podcast. It's a short form podcast. We hit it quick. It's about just going out there and breaking barriers to get the life you truly desire. So Live 100 podcast, find that across all the social media platforms. And then you get me at Live 100 or Jason Yarusi at Instagram.
Awesome. Again, Jason, so much fun. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, man.